Welcome to Just a Social Worker Podcast, where we seek to celebrate social workers. With host Lori Eldred, a licensed clinical social worker in Michigan. In Michigan.
Welcome to Just a Social Work Podcast. This is Lori Eldred, licensed clinical social worker in the state of Michigan. And today I have a lovely guest, Liz Sweetbrass, who's going to come talk to us about our kind of ongoing series of being politically active in social work, making social work radical, decolonizing social work. And so I'm super excited for this conversation. But first, I want to introduce Liz. She is currently a solo clinician and owner of Centered Self Mental Health Services in Grand Rapids, Michigan. She's been practicing as a clinical social worker, providing individual mental health therapy since 2021. She works primarily with those in the LGBTQI plus community, other mental health professionals, which, as a side note, super needed for lots of us. And she's also working with those who have complex trauma or PTSD. Of course, we know those two things can be connected, but they could also not be. She is trained in EMDR therapy, a lovely EMDR therapist, I might add. Prior to her clinical work, Liz has a variety of experiences working in child welfare as a child protective services investigator, area agency on aging, which is the local kind of Michigan name for Kent County, but is essentially that resource for the aging elderly folks, kind of 65 and older. I think many states have different variations. And she worked in a quality assurance role, as well as other meso and macro work within Fostering Success Michigan. Liz has both her master's and her bachelor's in social work and is currently licensed in the state of Michigan. So welcome, Liz. How are you today on this lovely cold November day? Good.
Yeah, very chilly November day.
Yeah.
Happy to be here.
Yes, and our first snow happened this week, so
yep.
One of those reminders winter is coming. Well, I know you and I talked off air, and we've kind of been having those conversations about what this means to be radical, be politically engaged, and really work on decolonization in the process of being a social worker and with the social work profession. So I'd love to hear kind of your thoughts and what you're experiencing and learning as you're going through your own process of decolonizing in social work.
Well, one of the things I love about social work is just the idea or like concept of person and environment or like systems approach. Like that is like one of the things that drew me to the field, being really versatile and just getting an understanding of like what does it mean to be human in context of our family, of our gender, race, ethnicity, and on and on and on, right? And so that can show up in the therapy space, or it does show up as in the therapy space for me as a clinician, because it does guide that work of like, how can I help somebody understand and remember who they actually are outside of all of these messages and information that we've been constructed and socialized with.
Yep, all the labels, the buckets, the roles we get assigned inadvertently, mostly inadvertently. I don't think lots of us sign up to be boxed into a particular gender, sexuality, race, ethnicity, language, right? We are in a circumstance, born in a particular place and time, not of our choosing.
Yep, not of our choosing.
Yeah. So kind of tell me some more about just what else has been going on with this decolonization. I think I'm hearing a lot of this discussion when I'm online, reading different things about how the social work field is kind of starting to reckon and grapple with our earlier history, our complicity in a lot of different events within our U.S. history, right? We look at the orphan trains. We look at what happened with Indigenous groups and communities. We look at our involvement in in World War II and some things happening that social workers were doing, civil rights. I mean, kind of on and on and on. So I'm curious about how you define that, what that means to you, and kind of your own process.
Yeah, I think a lot of times, like the therapy space, or at least like in my experiences before I became a clinician, is this understanding of like therapist knows best, or like somehow like therapist is the expert and then we have to like blindly follow them, or like, oh my gosh, please help save me from the treacherous soul that I am, right?
Fix all my problems.
Yeah,
Yep.
fix all my problems, make it go away. And I think just that narrative in of itself, it does a lot of people disservice and can often perpetuate that, like, here I am above you as a clinician, as a therapist, as a social worker, and I'm prescribing you a way to exist.
Yep.
Right.
Yep.
And so that's not my approach at all.
Mhm.
Right, because I really go in of like, who is this person? How can I understand them in a way to put a mirror up and be like, hey, who are you outside of all of these things of like who you had to be, or like who the world told you that you needed to be to meet that moment?
Correct.
And this like, I guess like the understanding of decolonization in that way of like really giving people like the means and the kind of like venue to really explore like who they are, and like remind them that they are the expert, point them to their own intuition, their own resources internally, and try to like get all the muck out from all of our socializing.
Yep. Yep.
And it really can lead to really beautiful, intense moments. Just like being a witness and like kind of stepping out of the way and allowing people to really, again, get in touch with their like roots essentially.
Yeah. Yeah. It's almost kind of like social work or even just being a therapist, right? Which are kind of two different things, can be, is almost being more of a guide than right on that pedestal, the ways that social work and our profession, especially I think in the therapy profession, like just being on a pedestal of like, you know everything, you have the education, you are supposed to tell me what to do, how to fix myself, give me advice. And that is a struggle I have even kind of within my own profession of like, I got advice, some thoughts for myself, right? But I'm still learning, I'm still knowing.
Answers.
Right. And let's work on this together. So it's more of a co-equal relationship than a relationship that's got that, kind of power over. Like, I'm the expert. I'm going to tell you what to do, and then you're going to magically be better. And it doesn't happen.
Yeah, I think that's like one part of decolonization, that addressing those power dynamics. Right. And like, yes, it's inherent. And also, we're both humans in the room, you know, and just trying to get to a different spot.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And undoing some of the unlearning, right? Unlearning, based on all of these roles that get assigned to us that we don't actively choose. The participation we have in lots of systems of oppression, as much as our profession as social workers is called to dismantle that, right? Being very conscious and aware of like where our privilege shows up, how we can use our voice or support the other, support others in their voice. Yep. Yeah. And it is like lifelong work.
Yes.
Right? Not just let's read a book and I can learn everything and magically better, but I can also participate. I can have experiences, relationships, connections. I can listen. I think that's a big activity. Yeah. I can listen to what others are saying to connect, like you were saying, I think even before we logged on, of like, what does it mean to be human? I can listen to another person's experience,
Right.
hear them.
And a lot of those systems of oppression, right, really get in the way of our ability to listen. Or again, like putting that like it's me against them, right? Or it's like us against whoever, when really like it's all just us.
Yes, we're all in the same boat together, right?
Right.
Nobody's really getting off this boat that is the earth, right? I mean, we're not getting off and living forever and ever, but we're in the same experience. right? How can we feel more connected to each other, especially now in a world that feels like we are incredibly disconnected from other people and from ourselves? Yeah. So, how can social workers who are in the role of a therapist or social workers in other roles see this work as essential? Like, how can we kind of wake up to seeing that decolonization is part of the work we need to do?
I think it does go back to doing your own work and own like investigation in terms of being curious about what is showing up for you, what layers of oppression are filtering your capacity or role as a therapist, right? Because like as much as we say like we don't want to get in the way, we inevitably do. And I think it's important to keep an eye on that, and part of that is like doing your own work, having your own therapy, addressing your own
Yep.
needs,
Yep.
and knowing that like you don't have to have it all figured out for you or for your people that you see.
Yep. Yeah.
I think that's a big one.
Yeah. And if you're a social worker, I say this, so I teach in addition to seeing clients, but I'm always telling my students, if you've not been in therapy, go
Go.
to therapy.
Go.
You at least should have an experience of what it is like to be a client, just so that you have that understanding, have that additional layer of the incredible vulnerability and fear and anxiety and worry. But also, the ways in which our own unhealed trauma as a therapist can show up in the room.
Right. Yeah. I think it's a really, really important part of this work that we don't necessarily, I think we're encouraging it more now, but at least like when I, was going through education and even, in the other roles that I've had, this that idea that we just have to
Tendency.
like, yeah, the tendency to just like kind of push through and like I don't have to pay attention to my stuff because if I help everybody else, then I'll feel better. When it's really like that stuff, it's deeply rooted and it needs some tender love and care
Yeah.
that often only you get, like through the guise of having a guide, having a skilled clinician to help you through that.
Yeah. And interestingly, too, our profession, unlike a couple other ones, doesn't really require, strongly encourage us to attend therapy. I believe in the code, maybe it's for psychologists or counselors, like there is some type of reference. I could be totally wrong. And if I am, I'd love to hear that, if I am, but I think there is that, kind of conversation of like, you need to be doing therapy and doing your work. Even if you're not a therapist, not a social worker practicing as a therapist, like,
Right.
You and I both had experiences being in child protective services, and man, you could get triggered all over the place if you came from a home that felt very similar and familiar to some of the clients, and the ways in that, which that can show up. Plus within the child welfare system, right, we see kids of color, Black and brown, going into care at higher rates, Indigenous kids going into care at higher rates, kids of color being just really trapped in the system. The system itself is lots and lots of issues and problems.
Yes, very much so. And I think like as you were talking about that, I was reminded of like how I guess those years of being a CPS investigator, I guess really facilitated again that like systems perspective and like being I guess a conduit for some of that systems of oppression without even like recognizing it always.
Yeah. Because when you're CPS, you're a state actor, essentially, kind of coming into families based on reports, right, that could be very legitimate, but also could be non-custodial or somebody else calling in because they're, upset with a family. And we're making very subjective decisions, right? I don't recall getting a tremendous amount of training in terms of like what is defined as a healthy family system, like healthy parenting, any of that type of stuff. It was kind of like, this is how you do your job. There's here's the complaint, you do the investigation, preponderance of evidence, but like, what are the standards we're using to make these decisions? And they typically are coming from a white, middle class, intact family standard. We were always told you can't kind of punish families for poverty, but I have to think families got punished because a large chunk of families getting referrals were folks, struggling and in poverty. I remember, I had one case drove me crazy, was a mom getting referral in the middle of August that her hot water heater went out. I'm like, it's August.
Who needs
Nobody's,
hot water?
nobody
this
really, right? No. And also, like, she was like, yeah, it went out because it broke and I got it fixed. And she could show me. And it's just like the use of resources where that was just like
really taxing.
really taxing and not really, that is not where we should have been spending our time, because my hot water heater's gone at my house, and it's like, to think, somebody would call, but I also have privilege, right? And knowing and being able to see that. Yeah. Yeah. And I bet you have cases like that too. You look back on, you're like, oh my gosh.
Stick out. Like, are you for real? I'm here. Doing
right,
what?
Right. Or just like, it's kind of like, going back over and over to families and the victimization just by us showing up, right? The terror, the anxiety, the worry that like my kids are going to be taken from me based on these arbitrary white family standards that are not applicable to my family for a lot of different reasons.
Right.
Not for an abuse or neglect reason, but families just look different. It's okay. Yeah. Do you have examples kind of, or thoughts about how some of this decolonization, deconstructing, I know we talked about the therapy, getting in therapy, and of course, making sure that you have a therapist that has this unique framework. I think you're obviously working on that and providing that as a framework and context. What else could, this deconstructing and colonization look like? Like, what are some things that could be helpful?
Yeah, it's a good question. Some things that could be helpful. Well, again, like, I know, like, referencing that power dynamic inherently, but also, I guess, like, relinquishing your, power, or like perceived power, or your privilege, right? That like you somehow know better than somebody in front of you. And really confronting that. I'm trying to think the other considerations. My thoughts escaped me a little bit with the decolonization, but just like other aspects of, I think one of them too is like remembering your own inherent wisdom, right? Because a lot of times, like in our capitalistic society, where like we're just produced and structured to go to school, get good grades, so we can work a full-time job and get the money to buy the things, and like no room for emotions, love, tenderness, rest. And so then we're just like overworking this, like, right side of the brain. I think it is. I can't remember which is which, but like that part of the brain that's like really logical, intellectual. Like we're so smart and we pick up on all these patterns. So anyway, the part of that decolonization is like returning to your own inherent wisdom, right? Like you have a nervous system that's trying to communicate with you. You have intuition. And I think a lot of that, like in indigenous cultures, right, is that like that was like really stripped away. Like all of that, kind of being a collective, being in community, really like leaning into your intuition and like, I guess, like your spiritual nature.
Yeah.
So I think that is one way to decolonize, is just like kind of consider, what would it be like if I did have a different understanding of this physical body in this time and space? What does it mean to be a human being and in relationship with our other human beings?
Yeah. I think you bring up the point too of like our kind of this rooted, where are we rooted at, right? I think I'd heard a podcast not so long ago that really just still sticks with me of, so, we live in this white culture dominated community, society, all these standards and ideals. And so much of white culture is disconnected from their roots. right?
Yes. Yeah.
And how do we get reconnected with who we are, with where we come from, with how we see ourselves in the world, right? Understanding we come with privilege, this white kind of, narrative, this white culture narrative, but like, I think that just that idea of, yeah, when you think about what it is to be white, a white social worker, and just we don't have, I mean, some of us have tremendous privilege and we can kind of know, but do we feel connected?
Right.
Right? Do we have that sense of community? Do we have a sense of a greater purpose? Or, yeah, the word's kind of escaping me. I think it's just in my own awareness. I mean, I feel like I'm at the beginning stages of some of this, but yeah, I just remember that conversation and probably not capturing that right.
Sure.
But yeah, I mean, you think of indigenous cultures and they have these beautiful, rich traditions, practices, sense of responsibility towards the earth and other people.
Yeah.
And I know just white folks have lost so much of that
Yeah.
in pursuit of wealth and greed and capitalism and feeling good about ourselves and conquest and obtaining more and more.
That kind of like
Yeah.
nothing's good enough, so we need to
Nope.
acquire more and more. When actually, like, we are good enough just exactly as we're born, created. Like, we
Yep.
are enough. And
Yep.
like, what would happen if we all really believed that fully?
Yeah. Yeah, because it's a feeling of emptiness that never gets filled, right? As much as, our capitalist society is always consume, consume, consume.
Mhm.
No matter how much we consume, it just doesn't feel any better. It's not meeting that hunger.
No.
Yeah. And do you think that, kind of getting engaged politically, going to protests is one way, or does that also look like supporting mutual aid networks?
Yeah, I think that it can look like a lot of different ways. And I think like something that especially in the times that we're in, there are a lot of social workers, right? Again, wear many hats and might have small children or like other responsibilities that maybe prohibit them from really gaining access to those like frontline active spaces. And so it's really considering of like, what can I do within my control or within my spaces that can still move energy toward or away from these systems of oppression.
Yeah, and it can be really varied, right? It
Mhm.
can, and that's always tricky when you have young kids at home or just kids in general, right?
Mhm.
Like your schedule and time is limited. And so locally, right? Is there at least maybe something
Mhm.
that could be done, whether that's giving financially, whether that's
Yeah.
sharing on social media, having
Yeah.
conversation,
Mhm.
right? Where
Yeah.
we're just calling attention and giving this other perspective.
Right. I think like some other ideas come to mind or like just like connecting with your neighbors, right? Or just like really like valuing and seeing them. And like if you are connected on social media, there's a lot of those like buy nothing groups, which I think again is somewhat of a mutual aid situation.
Yeah.
And just really like coming together and helping to meet those community needs.
Yeah.
And I
Yeah.
know every community is a little bit different, but again,
Yep.
let's just remember to look each other in the eyes, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And um see the goodness, I guess. Or
Yeah.
try to.
Yeah, and I like that idea. I guess I never thought of it that way, and that is a really interesting shift of like the buy nothing groups.
Mhm.
You could look at that as a mutual aid, right? I've got these things in my household that perhaps I don't necessarily need or don't have use of, but maybe they're still have lots of use left. I could
Yeah.
share this with my neighbor who could also, receive a benefit from it, or maybe that's something they're looking for, right? Reduce consumerism, reduce having to buy
Yes.
new things,
Yeah.
reduce adding everything to the landfill. But I like that kind of shift of like even little stuff. Join a buy nothing,
Mhm.
kind of sell nothing type group.
Yeah.
And, right, what do you have that you could, you know, post in there? Or, I mean, just get in there. Like, is there something that you might need that might
Right.
prevent you from
There
doing
might
some of that
be.
stuff? Yeah.
You never
Yeah.
really
No,
do
I like
know.
that.
It makes a connection
Yep.
with
Yep.
somebody. And I think even like there's an example too in my neighborhood. There's a few of the neighbors that got together to help this other neighbor with like external house stuff, right?
Nice. Yeah.
And
Amazing.
that comes to mind too of like what if okay, even if we don't have like the time and resources to like go to Lansing or to the White House, right? Or, you know, etc. You know, how can we still like actively protest these systems of oppression by being in community with each other?
Yep. Yeah, because your neighbor, you know, if you can't get out there and put up a shingle, or I know I can't do that, or, you
Right.
know, put some siding up, right?
Yeah.
I could bring some food over to make sure people who are
Absolutely.
working on it are fed,
Yeah.
right? Or I can have a kiddo come over, you know, or kind of
Mhm.
go over there and keep an eye on them, right? Keep them entertained so that folks have a little bit more space. Yeah. I like that. I think sometimes we do think like, what's the big thing? And
Yeah.
it's such a factor of like being an influencer and being this and just being so well known. And it's like, is that the goal? Like, I just want to be well known, or do you want,
Right.
you know, to be in community?
Right.
Yeah. Good. Good. What would you like people? I know we don't have tremendous time left, but what would you like people to take away from this conversation?
Yeah. That's a really good question. I need to be reminded. Let's see. That's right. I remember now for my own self. Just like expanding what you're understanding of like what it means to participate in political activism. Because I think again that can kind of fit into, oh, I'm not doing enough, right? I gotta be doing more and more and more. When in the reality is like, what can you do from your position in the world? And sometimes it might actually just be rest, as counterproductive as that sounds, but that can actually be quite restorative
Yep.
to give you fuel
Yeah.
to do other things.
Yeah. It can help with a good nervous system reset. If you're
Yes.
dysregulated,
Yep.
can just give you some space. It can open things up, have you feeling expansive, right? Sometimes just taking a nap really can shift a perspective,
Yep.
right? Let
Yep.
some of that unconscious brain do some work about the
Yeah.
thing you might be struggling with. And our unconscious brain is pretty freaking awesome
Pretty
at times.
cool.
Yeah.
Collective
Yeah.
consciousness.
Yep. Yep.
Yeah. So just expanding your understanding, I think, would be the main takeaway.
Yep. And I probably will add to, just based on what we've talked about, is the like, we can do these little things, right?
Absolutely.
It isn't this, you know, I have to write this book that's a New York Times bestseller, or I have to, you know, be on all the platforms and the podcasts. And it's like, it could just be looking your neighbor in the eye, saying hello. It could be introducing yourself to your neighbor. It could be, right? Supporting in our area, we've got the Grand Rapids Mutual Aid Network, can be supporting, you know, even if it's like I can give $5, I'll skip my Starbucks latte this week, and I can give that, you know, to my mutual aid, or I can buy, you know, I've got a little extra money, I can buy food, especially now. Fortunately, the last thing I read, Michigan is providing SNAP benefits, food benefits to individuals who need those. That's not always the case in every state, and there's a lot of legal kind of back and forth, and you know, the government and state governments being in the court system, but like even just providing some food for neighbors, you know, being, you know, as a social worker, we've got great knowledge of resources. So many little ways that we can kind of connect with other people.
Absolutely.
Any good resources? I could put those absolutely in the show notes. I will also link in the show notes to ways to get connected with you if they want to kind of learn more about your work and what you're doing.
Absolutely.
But good resources that maybe people could start to look at.
Yeah. I'm trying to think. I mean, I know there is a book. I think it's literally called Decolonizing Therapy.
Yep, there is.
Which I can't.
It's a thick one.
So there's that. Or just like, I don't know, expand your horizon on different, like if you listen to podcasts, right? There's a lot of, I mean, clearly maybe the people listening to this do listen to podcasts. So, yeah, just expanding, like understanding in that way. So, or like the other things that come to, I don't know. It's hard to
So
say
what?
for sure.
Yeah, what is it seeking out different communities' perspectives, right? Reading a book is great. It's a
Sure.
start, but shouldn't be where you stop, right? You can look in terms of local, right? Meetups or local ways that you can connect with other people, maybe in a different community. Or even I think, like you said, the resource is what if over the next week or two you got to know who lived next door to you.
Absolutely. I think also having a like social workers, right? If you are a clinician or work in child welfare or wherever you are, finding like a good peer or like a cohort where you can really like kind of like wrestle with some of these things or like how am I
Yeah.
showing up here or like what
Yeah.
just again to be in community in that type of way.
Yeah. Yeah. And I know in Michigan, there is, I think, one of the regions on the other side of the states doing a decolonizing book club. I can put that in the show notes. That's another kind of way putting in information on mutual aid networks, obviously listening to this podcast, look at kind of who's doing work in this area. There are some kind of lovely folks that I've follow on like mostly on LinkedIn because I don't know that they're necessarily on Instagram that they're doing some. I think Shar Yarwood or Yearwood is doing some, and Simon Cohen, he has a podcast, is doing some of that, right? Maybe looking for trainings,
Yeah.
right? I mean, that
You know
are
what I mean?
outside of like domestic violence 101, but like
Right.
going towards trainings that are more embodied,
Yeah.
so
Embodied
that
is
you can
huge.
get that experience or at least be
Yeah.
challenged, be uncomfortable.
Yeah. It's
That was a
okay.
good thing.
It's okay
Yeah.
to be uncomfortable. I think the other
Yeah.
thing too, I know I didn't mention it at any point, but like internal family systems or like parts work IFS, I think that lends itself well to this understanding of like systemic approaches or like we're just all a bunch of microcosms, collectively. And it, and I think that's a good resource really for anybody to check into of like what is showing up, what parts are
Yeah.
activated.
And even with an IFS, I know that there's subgroups, and this is, I think I've seen in some of the emails I've gotten, like a subgroup of really deconstructing, working on all of your implicit bias, the, kind of internalized misogyny,
Yep.
homophobia, classism, just all of that racism. That's all
Yeah.
just the waters we're swimming in, the implicit messages we're taking in very unconsciously. Most of us wouldn't consciously say, hey, I'd like to believe this, right? All of those societal beliefs that get stuck in our brain. So IFS is a great tool that way too. As we wrap, any final thoughts that you want to leave with the audience?
I guess speaking to that, like, I guess like my own position and privilege, or just like I owe it, or I find myself often reflecting on what an honor and privilege it is to, I guess, be a human who happens to be a social worker and who happens to be a clinician. Because it really is like just, I think, a unique slice of the world
Yeah.
and the understanding of what it means to be human.
Yeah.
And so if that resonates with anybody, then just a reminder to keep doing what you're doing or don't.
Yeah.
Maybe
keep
you gotta
showing up.
pivot a little
Yeah,
bit.
keep doing the work. I think adding to that, also knowing that like most of the folks in the social work profession look like us, white females, right? And we really, out of anybody, should be doing that hard work, right?
Yeah. Deconstructing your own.
Yes. Your own, kind of identities. And also, right, knowing that like that this is become a white culture, white person struggle problem that we really need to do work on that and
Yeah.
do the heavy lifting.
Absolutely.
Yes. Well, again, as always, it was very lovely to talk to you.
Yes.
And having this conversation, I know this is not a one and done conversation, right? This is going to be an ongoing conversation. And I hope to have more folks talking about this, because this is a way we make our profession better. We take care of ourselves. We become truly those professionals who are dismantling systems of oppression as encouraged in our code of ethics. So it only hopefully will get better as we do the harder work.
Yep. All right.
Thank you.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah. Yeah, great to talk to you, and I will talk to you again soon.
All right. Sounds good.
Yeah, bye.
Yeah.
Thank you for listening to Just a Social Worker podcast with your host, Lori Eldred, LMSW-C. All information in this show is not a substitute for therapy and is only intended for entertainment only. Should you need help, please reach out to 988 or your local mental health resource.